Welcome, and today we are joined by Rohit Dave, a Melbourne resident, father of two, and candidate for the New Jersey General Assembly from Legislative District 27. Rohit is a business leader at Block, the parent company of Square and Cash App, where he focuses on strategy and investments to expand economic access. He's also a former attorney and served in the Obama White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Through his work with nonprofits like Rescuing Leftover Cuisine and South Asian Youth Action, Rohit has championed food security and educational equity. His campaign is rooted for fixing New Jersey transit, reforming school funding, lowering healthcare and energy costs, and standing up for working families. So today we are going to be talking to him, and let's welcome Rohit to ITV Gold. Welcome, Rohit.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you.
So, before we start anything, let's start with what inspired you to run for the New Jersey Assembly at this moment?
In November of last year, after the election, I had a pit in my stomach. I did not feel like the country was headed in the right direction, but it was more than the election. In my community, I heard people complaining. Things were at a fever pitch, whether it was about education and things going in the wrong direction with our schools, whether it was about New Jersey Transit and that commutes were just broken and not working for them anymore. I felt like I looked back at everything I had done, all the causes I had supported, and it looked like it hadn't been enough. Gandhi said to be the change you want to see in the world. And I was trying to do that, but it wasn't happening. And so that made me raise my hand. Now, a lot of the things I care about are regional issues. They're federal issues. And so going to Trenton made a lot of sense to me, to be a bulwark against the federal overreach we're seeing, to be able to actually work at a state level to fix some of these funding issues and transit issues. So that's why I decided to run. Ultimately, I also wanted to give people a choice. What people don't realize in our state sometimes, because there's an election every single year, is that your choice really comes in the primary. Now, just the way districts are divided, a lot of times by the time you're at the general election, your choice has kind of been made for you. It's more likely than not that one of the parties is going to win. But at the primary, that's when you have an opportunity to choose among a bunch of different candidates. Senator Andy Kim actually helped make that possible last year. I won't bore everybody, but there was a ballot redesign that he championed. And this is going to be the first time in a long time that we have a competitive primary, both on the Democratic and Republican side on June 10th.
Absolutely. So, let's talk. What will that be the first thing you plan to tackle if elected? And especially, you just talked about New Jersey Transit, which is a big part of your platform. So tell me, what concrete changes would you push for to improve reliability?
It's a good question, and you're right. New Jersey Transit is probably my biggest issue. My wife's a commuter. I commute from time to time, and when the trains aren't reliable, when the buses break down, then you're scurrying to figure out who's going to take care of your kids, how are you going to get home, is it going to be through Uber, and that's going to be very expensive, which doesn't work for most families. And so we need reliable transit, and the ability to work somewhere further away and pursue different economic opportunity is incumbent on there being transit and roads that you can trust. And when I think about transit, we got to think about short-term solutions while also keeping an eye on the longer-term solutions that will require greater investment. So in terms of shorter-term solutions, there were a number of bus lines that New Jersey Transit privatized. And you think about DeCamp in my district. That has since gone out of business. And so there are a bunch of routes that are no longer available. During the pandemic, it seemed like people weren't going back to the office, but now that has changed. Folks are going back to the office, people are working in New York City, and they need transit, not just to the city, but also intrastate. And so busing is a really important part of transit. We often talk only about the trains, but there's a number of routes we need to revisit. And I think that we're working with the customer advocate at New Jersey Transit, a newly commissioned role, that we can actually put an investigation together and figure out busing routes that actually are responsive to population needs. We also need more frequent trains on the weekends. A lot of folks have moved into New Jersey over the last 5 or 6 years with the expectation that they're going to take their kids to ball games or to the theater. And now, especially with congestion pricing, not having frequent trains on the weekends is creating a real problem. And then other things are kind of simple. There's a number of things we can do to provide more real-time updates on repairs and delays. Today, there's data security issues. These aren't big issues that are being impossible to solve. We can solve those issues. We can do better tree maintenance on the line. So these are the shorter term things that I would want to do immediately in office. And then longer term, we have a gateway project. There's apparently $300 million of federal funding coming in to help fix that. Now, with the current administration, I don't know if that funding comes in. I imagine there's going to be longer term investment required. And so we have to put more money into the system without really hitting taxes on individuals. So we have a corporate business tax, corporate transit fee that expires in 2028. We have to renew that. We have a turnpike widening project that's costing us $10 billion without actually fixing a lot of issues. So we can probably take a big chunk of that and reinvest it back into the system. And then obviously congestion pricing, which is a controversial issue for many.
Absolutely.
But at minimum, what we should do is get New York back to the bargaining table. Governor Murphy actually turned down some funding that we could have gotten before the congestion pricing went into effect. Instead of taking it to the courts, it's on us to go negotiate with New York.
And I see that you have had a unique journey from law to tech to public service. And so tell me, how have those experiences shaped your vision?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have had so many different opportunities in different fields, right? From the legal profession to technology and finance. And to me, the thing that makes that helpful in an elected representative is I've seen problems from different perspectives. I come from a diverse set of experiences, and I can reflect the community I live in. And I would use those experiences to be able to be a voice for people in the community, whether it's a business owner because I work with small businesses, whether it's a technologist, whether it's somebody who really understands the law. I think those experiences are going to make me a better representative because it'll reflect the community I live in. I also believe that unlike folks who have been career politicians, I've worked in a way with stakeholders that's not zero sum, right? The idea is to 1 + 1 becomes 3. We can broker negotiations and find deals and solutions that are compromises where everybody can win. Unfortunately, these days, I feel like politics isn't approached that way. It's scorched earth. One person wins, one person loses. That doesn't need to be true. There's a lot of great laws, legislation over the years where people came together to actually come up with a solution. If we can just first align on what we want out of New Jersey, which is, I think, a livable place for families, where working families are given a platform to go seek access to economic opportunity, and where our kids are safe and can get good education, that's a good starting point. If we can agree on those things, I believe we can collaborate to find the right solutions.
Wonderful. And I know you have worked with the Obama White House, So tell me what any lessons you took from there and brought it back to Trenton.
Yeah, I would say transparency is the biggest lesson I learned. One of the things I spent a lot of time on was responding to FOIA requests. So these are requests people can make of the federal government to share data because the data ultimately is the public's data. Last year in New Jersey, actually, the legislature turned back some of the ability to request information through Oprah, and they created more friction. I think we have to go back to streamlining that and making it easier for citizens to request information from Trenton. That's one big thing I learned. I think the other thing I learned is that the data that the government sits on has a lot of value, but a lot of times it's underutilized. And so working with businesses to find ways to help them commercialize it, create services in public-private partnerships that can benefit all of us, those are the big things that I take away from that experience. And then I would say finally, technology is changing how we live, how we work. And I think Governor Murphy's done a good job of creating big business incentives for AI companies to come in here, public-private partnerships. Netflix broke ground recently, and I'm all for it. But one thing that I take away from that time at the White House, which I don't think I learned there, but something I wish we had done more of, is think about business incentives for small business owners. Ultimately, they're the lifeblood of our state, right? The more they succeed, the more business owners succeed. They create jobs. They provide for their community. They're more entrenched in the community. And I think we have kind of in New Jersey missed that opportunity to also provide incentives to those smaller businesses.
So, let's come back to New Jersey. And, New Jersey is one of the most expensive states to live in.
That's right.
So tell me, what's your plan to make it like more affordable for working families?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love talking about New Jersey Transit, but when I think about the issue most people talk to me about, it's about affordability. People are leaving the state because they can't afford it.
Right.
Now, I try to take a practical approach to this. There's only so much government can do, but there are things government can do. And when I look at the share of wallet, what do people spend money on and what's costing the most, it ultimately ends up being healthcare and housing. I think to add to that, where government can play a role, energy costs are going up. Obviously, people care about their taxes. Property taxes is what I hear the most about. And then, like I mentioned earlier, small business incentives. I'll try to keep it brief, but there's 5 different things. I'll talk about it very quickly. So on energy costs, we need to fix the Board of Public Utilities. They dropped the ball in negotiating with the regional grid operator, and we're going to see energy costs go up 20% now. I hear a lot of legislators now complaining about it, but they could have done something in advance. Let's change that commission. Let's make sure they're negotiating with the regional operator called PJM to make sure energy projects get online faster. I worry that we're creating skepticism about all the clean energy projects we invested into. We're in a climate crisis. We have to keep making those investments, but we need to show accountability to the ratepayers, to the residents, that you're not only going to pay more now, that at some point you're going to start paying less because these clean energy investments are going to pay off. We have to rely less on the grid. We can start community solar projects. We can also, I'm supportive of looking at nuclear too. Today, 40% of our electricity already comes from nuclear. So there's these big fixes we can make on energy. When I think about housing, I know right now there's a shortage in New Jersey of 150 to 250,000 house units in the state. That said, towns feel like they're being overrun because now they have a decades-old precedent of having to build affordable housing and market rate housing. And that's a good thing. However, the legislation last year that codified this requirement didn't do a good enough job of providing resources to the towns. Like, towns need funding for schools. They need funding for first responders. If more people are moving in, there's just more infrastructure needs. The housing formula doesn't incorporate that today, and it doesn't reward towns. It only has punishments for towns. There should also be incentives for towns.
Right.
And we should take it out of the courts when there's like a dispute. Right now, there's a lack of flexibility in a town having to change the plans that they agree to. There's, like in my town, I can tell you right now that there's a site that's been under contention. There is an easy solve, but there's a lack of flexibility in the system because it gets stuck in the courts. We need dispute resolution that sits outside of it. The important part about that is we will break ground faster, we'll develop housing faster, and people will be able to move in faster. So that's housing, that's energy. I'll do 2 more. So healthcare. It's widely reported that consolidation of hospitals has created a real cost issue and cost spike in New Jersey. We have to deter that. There's one big insurer in Horizon that has like 50% of the market. We have to create more competition on the insurer side. And then we're the pharmaceutical lab of the world, but our citizens don't get much of a discount from those pharmaceutical businesses that live here and work here and get incentives themselves. There's other states that have done a good job of capping some certain prescriptions, working with those same companies. We should be doing the same. And lastly, taxes. I'm realistic about taxes. There's not only so much we can do, but your local town property taxes, right? Half of that probably goes to school, a portion goes to the county, a portion goes to local services like your police department. On the schooling, we need to revisit the school funding formula. It hasn't been revisited since 2008. I believe that the state should be absorbing the special education needs and costs to create more uniform and accountable education for special needs throughout the state. And we should also look into the state funding more of the vocational programs because they're county level office schools. And taxing the local municipalities to then give the counties funding for their school budget creates a lack of transparency and creates a lot of mess around the state. I think those are 2 things we do that won't solve the property tax problem, but will take some pressure off. And lastly, again, small businesses. We need to continue giving them incentives. I'll give you one quick example. They liberalized the use of liquor licenses last year, making it easier for a restaurant to get one. That's great. However, the way they did it, it's probably going to go more to chain restaurants and malls. Right. And that doesn't help the mom and pop restaurant, Indian restaurant, Italian restaurant down the street. And it's a tough time for restaurants right now. So the liquor licenses help them get better margin on their businesses. So we built all these economic incentives that cater to big corporations as opposed to the small guy.
So, I'm just wondering, tell me one thing, what do you want, voters in, of course, Clifton, Livingston, Millburn, then there's Montclair, Roseland, West Orange. to know most about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess for me, it's that I'm a first-time politician here. I'm not a career politician. I come from a background of negotiating big deals at private companies, of being involved in the community outside of the political process. So my incentives are just different. I want to get in there to fix a bunch of things and to be a voice for our community and to stand up to federal overreach. I have a different incentive structure from other people who want to do this for the rest of their lives. And I think because of that, I am more reflective of the community. I'd be beholden to the community as opposed to being beholden to the party.
And do you think like New Jersey politics is ready for like more Indian Americans to come and be leaders?
Yeah, I think so. And like I'm lucky people have already paved the path for me. When I look at the state legislature, right, there's 120 seats, 40 state senators, 80 assembly people. I believe there are 5 people of South Asian descent already there. That said, the Indian population in New Jersey is growing. And so when I look at those numbers, it's actually still not enough. There probably should be 7, 8 legislators. And not only that, you see progress. You see Indian Americans like doing more on the federal level. There's some great Congress people that are fighting the good fight. But I think seeing that at a more local level is going to empower the next generation as well. And so for sure, I believe that we're a growing population in this state. We come with our own diverse set of experiences that are absolutely unique, and we need to see ourselves more. Like when I think about my Italian American friends growing up, they had leaders in government, they had cultural movies that were impactful, like The Godfather and others, and we didn't really see that growing up, right? And so I'm hopeful that by this campaign, people like me trying to do this across the country, that we'll see more of ourselves in the cultural fabric, and that'll inspire the next generation to shoot even higher.
And like being an Indian American, like education is like our topmost priority for like, all the family members. So tell me, what specific policies do you support to strengthen like public schools and access for those, the STEM education?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ultimately, it's a good point because the one thing voters have agreed on during this campaign, as I've talked to people, is that education is the one service that government should provide. People can't agree on a lot, but that's one thing they can agree on. And so it's no different, right? I think the Indian American community values it. When I've heard from folks in the community what they care about, it's also making sure that they have access to AP courses. My town, for example, there would be a lot of limitation in the ability of high achieving students for getting access to those advanced placement courses. They've changed that, but that's probably happening all throughout the state, and we have to make sure that kids have access to these more challenging courses, and part of that is hiring more teachers. There's a 5,000 teacher shortage in the state, and so we have to be aggressive about that and provide state-level resources to be able to our towns and boards of eds to be able to go successfully hire these teachers. And on the STEM side, I'm proud to come from a town that has good after-school programs with robotics and other curricula in the STEM field. I think we need more of that outside of school as well. There's only so much a teacher or teachers can do during the school day. Obviously there's a lot of great athletic programs, there's a lot of great arts programs. We do need more of the kind of engineering, medical, science programs after school. And one thing we could do that wouldn't necessarily increase tax dollars, because that's anytime we want to have a new idea, people say, oh, what's it going to do about my taxes? Well, there's a lot of great companies like Verizon, there's a bunch of big technology companies in our state who do from time to time offer programs at schools, but they're one-off. We could work with them in better concert to be able to provide these types of programs throughout the state on a more regular basis. And it'd be great for everybody, right? Because those employees there, take it from me, somebody who's worked at a big tech company, would love to give back to the community. And at the same time, kids will not only learn something in the abstract, they'll see like, oh, this person went and built that phone or that networking system, and they can kind of see how it applies to real life. So I believe those are things that we could do on the STEM front. Lastly, we have to, again, revisit the school funding formula.
Right.
2008, it's been 17 years. It's time. I think if we make a more population-based weighting, not just based on a stale census, we'll find that we'll fund schools and towns more adequately and start overcoming this issue we're finding in so many districts where schools are being underutilized or don't have enough funding. We'll find ways to actually give towns the funding they need for the student population at the time.
And you earlier mentioned that you have worked at the intersection of technology and finance. Yeah. So tell me, how will you use that expertise to boost economic opportunity for our community?
Yeah, again, it's a good point. I think on the small business front is where I really see the opportunity. The New Jersey Economic Development Authority, they do a good job putting out loans. I think there's still a dearth of lending to a lot of great, good risk entrepreneurs where the Small Business Association or banks have failed. So we can fill that gap more. I think about obviously in our communities, there's folks who run all sorts of businesses, from consulting businesses to hotels to liquor stores, convenience stores, all kinds of things. And there are just a lack of resources sometimes. You end up borrowing from your family, and folks are fortunate enough that they know somebody, but not everybody does. And so I do believe that there's a lending program that we can expand on already in effect. And again, these bigger business incentives that we've given away in New Jersey, we need to also balance that back to the small businesses. The last thing I would say on the small business front is there's a lot of hoops to jump through at the local level, permitting, licensing, and that's okay. I mean, those regulations are there for a reason, but it's hard. If you're somebody starting a business for the first time and you're trying to figure it out, it's really tough. We have in New Jersey, a centralized way to online get a business registration, but all those other things, they're still different town to town to town. If you're ambitious and you want to build a business that's not just in not just in Millburn, but expands to West Orange and other places, it's a real chore. So I think by simplifying those processes and creating more of a central way to jumpstart a business, I think we would do our community a big favor in encouraging entrepreneurship and business ownership.
I think listening to you, it's a pleasure. And I'm just, wondering and thinking about, how do you balance being, deeply American and proudly Indian? And, how do you help others to do the same?
Yeah, it was something I don't think I struggled with growing up because my family and my parents did a good job of creating a safe home and making sure that I could be proud of my identity. But it was tough, right? You were constantly switching in different forums when you're in different rooms, and that can be difficult and challenging. I do think those barriers are breaking down. I've seen in our own town where there are days of observation, days off from school for Diwali. There's a rich Indian cultural organization there. And so ultimately, the thing that I like to bring from home and kind of I think is universal are the values my parents gave me, right? They came to this country like many immigrants do with very little in their pocket. I really sometimes take it for granted, but they were fearless. And so that fearlessness, that belief in economic access, I can bring that to any conversation I'm in. Every community tends to value those things. And then ultimately, it's that family orientation. I do think we're lucky. We're living through a time where folks are depending more on their families. Family relationships are getting a little bit stronger, and that's very Indian, very Asian American, right? And I think those values are now kind of permeating into the rest of society. So I'm hopeful that people don't feel the same way maybe we did, right? Where, hey, I belong to this group, and how do I expand that network into these other groups? Hopefully that more of the values that we have cherished at home are being seen throughout the broader community, and if they're not, it's on us to kind of project that into the world.
One last question. Why should people pick Rohit Dave?
New Jersey has had representatives for too long that have been beholden to corporate interests and to lobbyists and to a party that's gotten complacent. It's time for a change, for somebody who can come in with a fresh perspective and be accountable to people, who has driven results in both private and public sector, who has been transparent and is in it for the right reasons. So that's why I'm running, to actually bring change and not just serve a career in politics. And so voting for me will bring some of that technology, finance, executive experience to government at a time when we really need it, when budgets are being cut, and we need somebody who can make those hard trade-offs and prioritize correctly for people.
I would like to wish you all the best, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you.